in session, and thank you for your patience with us. And that leads us to item number 9 on our agenda, and that would be reports. I'll recognize Mr. Hicks first.
First of all, let me say that I want to make sure that this doesn't come off too negative, but by the same token, I want to make sure that the points that I make are basically my own points. And being on this board, soon be 5 years that I've been on this Board of Education, and I know most of you don't like it when I speak. You don't like the way that I do things, but I come from the old school, and I know there's been times that there's a lot of issues that have come up that I've either asked for clarification or more information, and even though I got it, sometimes I still thought that some of those things were very unnecessary in what we do through education and what education is about. And if I get lost, indulge me, because I'm not used to making notes. Everybody knows I'm a Baptist minister and I just preach from the book, so I don't have any controversy with that most of the time, but sometimes I do lose my place. It appears that education in the 21st century is not the same education that my generation was afforded. Subjects may be the same, but I'm afraid that we've lost sight of a track that we need to be on, and we need to get back on if we can. And to give you kind of a little history of where I'm coming from, if I were to ask you, how many of you have ever heard of W. Edward Deming? One person. Barry said he had. Well, let me just give you a little background, because this is kind of where I come from, because I know about it. Mr. Deming was an American engineer and statistician, professor, author, lecturer, and management consultant. He was born in 1900 and he died in 1993. Mr. Deming developed what became known as total quality management, which he introduced to American companies after World War II, and was rejected because the companies thought that they knew more of what they were doing because they had effectively implemented the war machine that won both wars against the Nazis and the Japanese. Mr. Deming then turned to the Japanese and said, if you will allow me to put my process to work, your recovery from the war will come much quicker, and the Japanese did. In a mere few years, Japan was on the way to becoming a world producer and manufacturer at the highest quality afforded to them, being an island. Not until the proven success of his method by the Japanese did the American industry get on board. So in the late 70s and early 80s, Demingizing became a popular concept for industry in America. His method was simple. Deming cycle, or PDCA, you like those acronyms, or PDSA, is a continuous, now you get this, it's a continuous quality improvement model consisting out of a logical sequence of 4 repetitive steps for continuous improvement and learning. And that's what the PDCA stands for: plan, do, check, and act. And then later on, Mr. Deming seen that the check didn't seem to be sufficient enough, so he changed it from plan, do, study, and act. This method would work in education too because we have all the elements it takes to improve consistently. How do I know all of this about the demonizing? Because in 1980, I was demonized. And the course to become acquainted with this 4-step process was not a short course. Mr. Shedden, Debbie's husband, has also been demonized. You can go and let him refresh your memory. And it was an intense study that we went through to implement in our manufacturing process that eventually eroded away, and now what used to be the International Card and Label is an empty lot. And I perceive the same thing could happen to public education if we don't make some changes. Now that I've said all this, some months back we approved to send a segment of teachers to Leader in Me training, and I requested the books that so excited them to this concept, and I spent months studying the books and made many notes, got a whole notebook here full of notes that I made as I went through the book. And I studied these things, and the 7 Habits of Highly Effective People might be a good book to have in everybody's possession. I don't know. It's very good. And because of my experience in the manufacturing segment, I see these qualities that maybe I missed a few of them somewhere along the line that might have made me an even more effectual person in what I did. But as I read through this, I came to the conclusion that as I was reading through this book, and I mean, it's good reading. Matter of fact, it's almost enjoyable reading. The only thing is that bothered me is most of these schools were charter schools and private schools and specialty schools that implemented the Leader in Me process. And I'm not saying it won't work in public education. I believe it would. But I believe also that it tells you in this book to start with that this is a process and it's not a one-shot deal. You got to start at the very infancy of a child's education and carry them all the way through to some level. I have the concept, it might even be up to graduation from high school, but I also believe if we had smart implementation of it, we could probably get up through middle school, and by then our kids would be in a position to realize that not only if you can't be a great leader, in order to be a great leader, you got to have some great followers behind you. You know, it's kind of like going into combat and you turn around and ain't nobody behind you. That's a scary thought. But let me share one of the things that jumped out at me. This is what the book says is listed as the skills that companies are looking for in people that they want to hire. Communication skills, verbal and written. Honesty and integrity. I told my wife there's 2 things I want her to put on my tombstone when I die. One of them that I was a man of integrity. If I told you something, you better believe I'm going to try my best to accomplish it for you. And then secondly, I told him, put on there, I told him I was sick. The third thing was teamwork. They want teamwork skills. They want interpersonal skills, self-motivation and initiative, strong work ethics, analytical skills, technology skills, organizational skills, and creative minds. A lot of criteria that they're looking for. And my question is, are we doing that for our kids? Are we putting our kids in a position from the very one at my level down towards the bottom of the B's, all the way down to the D's and back and forth, giving them the opportunity to be the very best that they can be at what they can do, and being able as teachers and administrators to recognize that in these kids and help them to achieve the best they can. And the reason I'm saying this to you is because I know that works, because I had it to work for me when I was in high school. How many of you went through 4 years of high school in the same school? Huh? How many of you? I went to 4. I went to 4 high schools in 4 years. So I know the innovation from different levels of high schools. from South Carolina to North Carolina to Tennessee. And I know that in those days, and to be honest, in June the 3rd, it was 50 years since I graduated from high school. So you know how long that's been. And I'm not no spring chicken. I've done my duty. I've done everything that's been asked of me by a nation and by my family and everybody else. But the thing that bothers me more than anything is when I get calls from parents and these parents ask me, what are you teaching my kids? And my response is, I'm not teaching them anything. I don't teach them. I'm just a school board member. A grandmother related to me, I'm raising my granddaughter. She's getting ready to graduate from high school, and she came in and she asked me how I was, and I told her I was fine. I said, where you been? And she said, I went and had my hair did. And the grandmother looked at her, who is my age, and said, you done what? She said, I had my hair did. She said, no, you had your hair done. She said, done, did, do, what difference does it make? And to me, that was eye-opening for me. That's the case that it may be. And I don't think that this process of leader in me, it can't work on any short-term plan at any level. It must start at kindergarten level and proceed from there. The concepts are good if we can implement those concepts, and I think Mr. Bellamy has done some of that at Hawkins Elementary, and then we're at Mount Carmel has done some of that. I don't know what the success rate of that is, and I'll address that in just a few minutes. And that, I guess it comes up to the second point. Since I've been on the board, we've spent hundreds of thousands of dollars on training inside and outside our system. And as far as I know, all of this training has not raised our academic level 1/10 of a point. As far as I know. I've never ever received one report on results of any outside training or inside for that matter. Therefore, I'd like to propose that we suspend all of our outside and inside, not necessarily inside training, but that we suspend all of our outside training that is not contractual to individuals, both in administration and teachers. And I would be glad to put that into a form of a motion, and in light of that it continue until we've got numbers that show improvement in testing either at 10 ready level or in the course. Thirdly, every year since I've been on the board, the Tennessee legislature, you commissioners, stick your fingers in here, has continually passed new education laws that I venture to say most of them don't even have a clue what it is they're voting for or how it would affect school operation or, more importantly, school board. It appears that the goal of school organizations, and I won't name any of them, is to put the school boards out of business by the things they lobby for on the Hill. Case in point, in Kingsport Times News, July the 6th, headline, New School Law Now in Effect. And it listed several new school laws that went into effect, I assume, July the 1st. The one that stood out to me the most was the civics test that students must pass to graduate. Well, guys, that really throws the idea out the window that there's more elements than one that could keep a kid or a student from graduation. The state legislature has made it into law that a student that can't pass that civics test can't graduate. That's state law. I don't know who's going to enforce it, but that's another issue. It also puts my mind to work on how our administration must be jumping through hoops to come up with a surefire way to get all past this test. Since our mission is to get a diploma in their hands at all costs, educated or not, with this in mind, I also propose that in the 2021 school year, this board implement a number of days a student can miss and still pass the course. That's been a stickler of mine, you guys know it. It has been a stickler of mine because this whole presentation for me is to get us off of square one and get us to doing our job. Because I don't think we do it very effectively. Fourthly, since I've been on the board, I've never seen or heard a plan to move the system forward. We have been at level one system now for some time, and there's nowhere else to go but up. It appears to me there's no accountability, no direction, no goals that can be measured, and apparently no desire on anyone in administration or on this board to make changes to make this happen. Therefore, it is the utmost importance and urgency that we as a board establish policy that implements requirements of the administration and faculties with measurable and gradable requirements to move our system forward. And that these be added to performance and evaluation of all certified employees and administration positions. And again, I'm prepared to put these in the form of a motion if we don't want to deal with them. And let them fail if they fail, so be it. That's your wishes. That's fine. That's what democracy is all about. So in conclusion, which I'm sure most of you are glad is coming, I was very embarrassed, Mr. Hixson, at our last meeting over two retirees that came to that meeting, two ladies, that had a combined years of service of 67 years. Now, it may be because one of them was a librarian and the other was a teacher's aide. I don't know. But both of those individuals, maybe somebody found out that both those individuals are very close to me and thought it would be a good way to get me. I don't know. Miss Patsy Allen, who was a librarian at Lawrenceville, is also a member of First Baptist Church in Lawrenceville, where I pastor, and a tremendously sweet lady. And her husband, they called me, and they really dressed me down big time. I'm used to it. When you're a Baptist preacher for a while, you get used to being dressed down. And her husband said to me, he said, it wasn't even worth me taking a shower for. Ordinarily, we bring people up to the front and recognize them and even take a picture maybe. But 40 years in our system needs to be more than just, oh, I see you sitting back there and we recognize you. And then Carol Hixson is married to my oldest first cousin on my mama's side. And she don't like me much either, but anyway, she sort of read me the right act over the way they felt they were treated. It would have probably been even better to have brought them up here, made a picture, shook their hands, and thanked them for what they did. So I would think that in the future that we need to restrict our acknowledgments of these retirees formally and just let them retire. But let me share this in actually closing. All I would really want is our students to get the best education. And I really think that the 3 R's are still tremendously important. I use all 3 of them every day of my life. I don't think I've ever used any algebra. I'm not sure I've ever used any trigonometry. I don't think I've ever used any calculus and functions. I've used some geometry, but adding, subtracting, and multiplying and dividing, I do it every day of my life. And we got kids graduating from high school, and I can bring you some in here if you want me to, that can't do some of those things. And it's a shame. And I don't know where we're losing them. I don't know at what level we're losing them, because the day-to-day operations are up to you guys and Mr. Hicks. Most of what I've presented to you this evening is based on my personal observations and the information that I read in the packets that we get, the achievements that we have made, and the accolades that we have gotten as a board for whatever reason are good, but accolades don't educate our children. I've got a granddaughter that'll be in the 3rd grade next year. Mr. Bellamy will have her if he hangs on. And I want her to have the best opportunity she can get. I've got one grandson that can't remember hardly his name from one day to the other. And he was dropped out of Hawkins County school system like a rotten apple out of a barrel. I mean, literally. My middle grandson graduated from Cherokee High School, went on to Walker State, and he just earned a degree in criminal justice and will be going to the police academy, hopefully in August. Just turned 21 this week. My third grandson, the jury's still out on him. You guys got your work cut out with him. And I'm on your side with him. Cut him out if you can by the seat of the pants. And I don't, as I discuss these things with teachers that I know, and I don't know a lot of teachers, and with people I meet on the street, I'm given this line a lot of times. Well, state requirements set the precedent for what we do. Guys, let me tell you something. I'm thoroughly convinced that chances are there's another level above state requirements. And that's where we need to get. We need to get above and beyond. These athletes that were up here today, you don't think that every time they ran a mile, or every time they ran I don't know what they are, how they're measured now. When I was in school, it was a 440, 880, 100 yard. Don't you think every time that they went to that line and started, they weren't out to beat the time they had just run? I guarantee you. And we need to give our children an opportunity to beat the time. We truly do. Is anybody here from Churchill Intermediate? I need to see if they get those. Thank you. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen.
Mr. Hicks, football coaches regarding turf fields and field repairs. Is that something we still want to take up this evening?
Sure. I know Coach Castle is here and wants to give us an update on where we're at with potential funding and that whole process.
Those of you that do not know me, my name is Josh Castle. I teach chemistry at Volunteer, also coach football. Back in April, we proposed looking at putting turf fields down at both Cherokee and Volunteer high schools. We talked about the numbers and where they were, and we'll get to that and funding that I have right now that we've looked at. The first thing I do want to talk about, because as we sit right now, the turf fields will not be done by this year, even if we wanted to start tomorrow. I can't speak for Cherokee's field because I don't go to Cherokee's field very much, once a year. But I do know we still have some things that need to be addressed at Volunteer's field, safety issue-wise. I know if you drive by, you look at it, it looks green, you can play on it. But until you go onto the field, you're not going to really see where the danger comes in some spots. And actually, it's probably worse for soccer than it is for football that I'm standing up here talking about. The home sideline, where the stands are, there's several. If I laid a level across it, I guarantee you it's at least 6 inches. I do know the repairs for the water did finally go through. Okay, the backflow device is up. We were able to put some water on the field. But my main concern is some of the actual playing surface itself. Regardless of whether this turf can ever happen, it's about the kids, period. Whether we play on turf and give them a really level field, that field needs a little bit of, actually a lot of attention. Whether it be, filling in that sideline somehow, grading it down. I'm not an agriculture person. I don't know exactly what we need to do to it. Okay, but there does need to be something addressed to it in some form or fashion as far as field requirements, or as far repairs. Okay, you won't notice until you go on it. All right, so I encourage you, if you get time, don't just drive by it and say, "Yep, that's green grass there. They can play on that." Walk the field for, just down and back, and you will feel all the holes and the dips, and then you walk to the home sideline, and I promise you, here's the playing surface, here's the sideline. If we got lucky last year, a kid from Southern South actually got tackled onto a crate that was over there. If that kid gets hurt, we could be looking at some type of lawsuit thing. And I know that's not something anybody wants. But there is a safety concern there. And regardless of whether this turf ever happens, okay, I still believe that this turf could be huge for this county. 100% of the kids in the county would use that turf in some form or fashion. Maybe not for football, maybe not for soccer. Gym classes, graduations, whatever it may be. Okay, but regardless, the field as it sits right now at Volunteer High School does need to have something done to it. Whether it's filled in, whatever it needs to be done, but some things need to be done for safety purposes right now. So I just want to go ahead and put that out there as far as repairs. Something does need to be done. Okay, whether it's, small, large, whatever it is, we need to look at that. What I will go ahead and I'm not going to sit up here and talk for a long time. I just want to get that out there that it does need to be looked at. With the turf, myself, I took a lot of this up on myself to try to go out and try to get some things. When it hit July, I personally, I'm not going to sit up and be a hypocrite and say I'm up here for the kids if I'm not doing everything I can for the kids the right way. So I actually pushed this a little to the back burner myself because I coach football and we're about to go back to school and chemistry is not exactly easy. Okay, so I got my work cut out for me every year. So I don't want to spread myself thin. I'm focused on helping people win some football games and teaching our kids chemistry. All right? I can teach you how to teach and balance some equations later if you want to know.
I'll help you. That was my subject.
All right. So I put it a little on the back burner, and I will go to it and start getting some more funding, after football. But I will tell you where we're sitting right now. I have one committed, a six-figure donation. And I'm not going to throw out the business unless you guys just really want that. I want to keep it a little. I don't want people to know how much they are, but it is six figures. I have another company as well that has done a study to see if it was viable for them to do a sponsorship with some advertisements, and they've done their study. And this is through a mediator. I don't have the paper in my hand, but they said it is viable. And that one was requested of around $500,000. Okay, so that's a large portion. And you're looking at possibly over $600,000 in a matter of 3 months in two companies. Now, none of that is guaranteed, but that is some verbal interest in that. Okay, so what I want to say with that, and then I'm going to be done here, is I think the turf fields would be a huge thing for Hawkins County as a whole. All right, it takes you to another level, just appeal and what you can give these kids. Now that being said, if these turf fields never happen, and if I come back to you in December and I have absolutely nothing, and it can't happen, I think as a board, as a county, we need to figure out somehow to not leave over $600,000 sitting on the table. Figure out somehow to still partner with those, get some advertisements somewhere to use $600,000. Whether it be, to do, put things, roofs on, whatever it is. You don't want to leave that money just sitting there if somebody is looking at doing that. I don't know what the advertisements could be. We were putting it on the turf. I know I've seen some people, they put it on the back of their bus. It's proudly sponsored by. I just don't want us to leave something on the table that could benefit this county in some form or fashion. Like I said, I'm still going to push for this turf because I do feel like it could be something major for this county. But you also can't leave an opportunity sitting on the table. So, that's all I got. Unless somebody's got any questions.
Any questions of Coach Castle?
How long is it to your first football game?
Our first game is actually down at CAK. It's
Home game.
Home game. It's our second one, so it's first week of, might be the 30th of August, something like 30th, 31st.
So realistically, you've got 6 weeks to get something done to that field. What kind of resource, is there any resources up there at all to do repairs?
There is, excuse me, Coach,
Yeah.
There's concerned citizens like the foundation that I discussed at the last meeting. Folks are starting to come together, and there is going to be a joint effort to put fertilize on the field next week. It was going to happen this week, but the co-op was out of that particular time of fertilize. So there is a movement, let's call it, of some folks getting together, moving forward with organizing a foundation, but first and foremost, it is to get the field in the best possible condition grass-wise. Now, what you're referring to is going to take some more steps than what these folks that are organizing the foundation can do in this amount of time.
I required a guy to come and look at it and see what it would cost maybe to raise that drainage to where we could still get drainage and level it out, but I haven't got a quote from that. I would imagine it's not going to be exactly cheap. It's not going to be crazy amount, but if you, again, I know I'm up here and I'm preaching about it, but if you walk on that field and just see the drop off on that sideline, it's pretty good. It's not just us on the field. I know some gym classes don't really want to go down there because of the condition, that it is.
This may be an inopportune time, and Mr. Hixson, if it is, correct me and don't answer, but isn't there funds, did we not approve funds for athletic facility maintenance? And is those funds not readily available?
We're past July 1st, they are readily available.
Ken, let me ask you a question. When you were talking about holes or dips, are they on the playing surface
Yes.
too?
Yes. They're not as bad as that. That sideline is the worst.
Well, I understand that, but being a former football player, I know how it is when you play in cow pasture. Or on an old cinder where they used to dump the cinders up there at Lumber. But the point of it is this, could those be marked and we get some dirt, fill those in, flag somehow? I mean, I've got equipment. I mean, that's not no big deal to me.
I can put, let me, if I may, let me get you with the folks that are organizing this and see what we can do.
Okay, yeah, it's fine. I mean, my number's out on the wall everywhere, probably on the post office wall. Call me.
There's a pretty
Coach.
substantial.
I'll do everything that I can to help
layer.
the guys out.
Well, they use some of that somewhere. I don't know where, but there is still some there.
And Short Mountain will probably give you more.
And if we need dirt, I've got people that we could get dirt, would be tickled to death to haul a load of dirt.
And that's probably what needs to be done on that sideline. It's just, there's a drainage there, and we just can't just, I don't know how to.
And here again, if I may, with the folks that I'm working with and other folks that want to join in, still send me an email, contact me. But in conjunction with Mr. Glass, we're coming up to brainstorm some ideas and see if we can't make this happen. Not through your department,
We need to
not
move
through the
fast.
schools, maybe monetarily with some of those funds, but doing it appropriately through our maintenance department with Mr. Glass's approval, see what we can't get done there.
I would recommend we go through the maintenance department just to make sure that we have things and issues like liability and other things considered with bringing people onto the field to do the work, especially around equipment and potential hazards.
Most definitely.
Well, I've got my own, so you can do whatever you want.
Any further questions of Coach Castle?
But I appreciate your effort, Coach.
Coach, thank you for all you've done,
Absolutely.
and we're impressed with what you've done thus far.
Yeah.
And we look forward to seeing, what we accomplish. We're all pretty excited about the prospect of turf on both fields. But if we get there, it's a great accomplishment.
I forgot one thing, actually.
What's that?
And this is actually, I've just, the company we were going through is in the process of, and they just put this new turf down in Oakland. And I've got to get more information, but I want to put this in your ear. They're saying that turf can last up to 30 years. Okay, so then now we're talking about 3 times. And it is a little more, but it's not that much more, not what you need. So if you're talking, just keep that in mind as we get a little closer. 30-year field is major.
Better than 10.
Oh, yeah. Okay, but I'll have to get more information on that. We've reached out. We just saw that this week, like Tuesday.
Good.
So,
Get a second?
Just not give Mr. Glass, did the backflow valve of Cherokee also get fixed?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
appreciate it.
That brings us to Melissa Farmer on our budget. There's a draft rate included in your handouts on your front of you. I think it's got a clip on it. And if you'll, Ms. Farmer, point us to the right page. Looks like it's the top page, perhaps.
Yeah, just put a few notes together for you there on the top page. I wanted you to see what the current tax rate is and what portion of that tax rate that the schools has worked with. So you can see there, the July 1st budget workshop, the budget committee voted to reduce the school share tax rate by 2 cents. So we were at 1.1120, that would leave us at 1.090. So in the third draft, which is behind the notes pages there, what we've done as far as we reduced our general purpose funds by that 2 cents. So in that revenue number 40110, which is current property tax,
2 cents, what is that equal to?
That was the $175,893. Now that, like I said, we took that out of general purpose funds, therefore the cities are sharing in that loss.
The total without the city share was $205,000.
That's what I wanted to ask about, the difference of the 205, which is around $30,000 difference, but
Right, because those funds have to be shared with the cities, so then they take on that loss of their portion.
okay, and suggestions on how we're gonna make up 175,000, 176,000 almost.
Well, how are we gonna make it $3,325,388? That's even better.
Well, there's $175,000 in the $3,000,003.
Yes.
Okay, well, I thought so. That's coming from the undesignated fund balance.
Correct.
So I guess that's where we've got to put our minds to work and turn to recover $176,000 somewhere in.
Or are we just gonna do, is this up for approval for us tonight?
Yes.
It does need to be approved if at all possible because of the timeline that we are under with the state in getting our budget approved and to the commission and approved through the commission before submitting to the state and enacting our school year. Like Melissa said, the only things that we changed were that BEP and the tax rate.
That is a matter for vote on item 11 of our agenda tonight. So I think we're going to hear some more information on how we can recover
Correct.
from the 175. So we'll, if it's okay with you, Mr. Christian, we'll try to answer that
Well, I'd
question.
say I don't have any other knowledge than this right here, so I'm not apprised of any other information.
I think $205,000 was a recent development, and the commission's last meeting on the approval of a proposed budget for them, that's kind of where we're at. So it's up to us to resubmit another budget to them that would fall within the guidelines that they set forth for us.
And I agree with that. It is a tight timeline. However, the two differences is the difference, and it is a difference that we had to act upon because that was taken by the commission on July 1st. Between July 1st and today's date, which would have been, remember, our board meeting would have occurred last week. We have worked to reconstruct this budget reflective of those 2 cents pulled back. We had a lengthy meeting. We understand why that's being done by the commission. They have the county to consider, and a lot of maintenance and expenditures that they're looking at, as are we.
I'm not questioning,
I think
I'm not questioning the county commission's move here.
I'm not either. I'm just giving you a picture. The only difference between the budget that you approved and this one is reflective of those 2 cents and the BEP allocation and the tax rate difference.
Right, and I see we're kind of in a position we have to approve this.
The only way around that, Mr. Christian, and if you don't feel comfortable, we're not trying to strong arm anybody into that. It's just a timeline issue.
No, I agree, that's why I'm saying we're in a position.
We could call a special meeting in order to give yourselves time to look at that, but that shortens that timeline. That's the only thing that I would say about that.
Well, the dilemma that we face, we've got the same number of schools that we are trying to maintain and keep open at this point, prior to the budget being submitted, as we do after the 2 cents was taken. ADM, I think that is what the commission acts upon, and rightly so, and they probably could have taken more at this stage. They've seen fit to take 2 cents, and I think that gets the 12 cents that was given to the school board back in 2012. I think that takes just about all that back. But our enrollment has declined, and I'll be the first to admit that. And so with that being said, I don't put any particular blame on anybody. We've just got to be frugal in our effort to try to come up with a way to make this work, and we'll hear some suggestions perhaps next on our agenda here of where we're at. So with that said, that is the budget. That's where it's at. It's $175,983, different than our previous submission. So we'll get to that on item 11 of our agenda.
Plus the 31.
Plus 31,000.
The 205 overall that the cities are losing. Kingsport and Rogersville, yes.
No, it's the 31,000 from the decrease of our DEP, that's it.
I'm sorry. Okay, any questions for Ms. Farmer on the draft number 3 that's been submitted? Hearing none, we'll move on to Mr. Hixson for class collapse and closure.
So to paint the picture here, I paid attention to what the commission was stating. The commission stated very loudly and clearly that we have rolled ending fund balances for the last 4 or 5 years in the millions of dollars. First and foremost. Secondly, we have lost enrollment. We put those two together and they felt that and thirdly, they had a need to use the money that they allocated to take away from us, representative of $205,000 to help assist some problems that they have with maintenance and facilities. And that's understandable because we all own about the same age buildings. So we're kind of in the same boat that the county's in. With that being said, I listened to those 2 first points and realized that if we were going to do what's needed to be done and reduce our deficit, so to speak, year to year and our draw upon that ending fund balance, we needed to do some things that allow us to save long-term dollars. So in order to raise teacher salaries, which was one point that the commission brought up, that they would have rather have seen our monies over the years go to teacher salaries in order to remain competitive, and I 110% support that notion. In order to do that, that's a long-term expenditure. We have to identify long-term savings. And in order to do and identify long-term savings, we've got to be able to embark on some difficult conversations. One of which is to consider our school sites. Those that are outside of BEP funding because of low student enrollment. Those that are outside of BEP funding because of extraordinarily high maintenance costs, so on and so forth, in order to keep them up and running. We have an opportunity, you've been presented with $175,000 after the share from the city schools is taken back, so to speak, or withheld for our capital outlay funds. We have that balance of $175,000 roughly that we need to look at filling. One suggestion, we had 2 retirees at Keplar Elementary School representing 4th and 5th grade at Keplar. They were veteran teachers. They made pretty decent money in our county, so to speak, for the amount of years they provided service, and they left 2 big holes that needed to be filled. We have recruited, we were heading down that road, we have not offered those positions. One scenario that almost bridges that $175,000 gap is to not staff those 4th and 5th grade positions at Keplar and to relocate those students to Hawkins Elementary School, a school that we have room for those two classes worth of students. We then do not hire those staff at Keplar, and we save the salary of those 2 full-time equivalent staff positions. Roughly speaking, I think we can assume that we would backfill those positions with newer teachers. So although if we did hire teachers to backfill those retirees, we would be looking at reduced salaries. But in this scenario, we would not be backfilling those salary positions at all. We would be enveloping those students into existing spots at Hawkins Elementary School.
And if we did that, how many students would that leave at Kepler?
Kindergarten through 3rd grade.
I mean, numbers, you don't know.
Well, if you back out roughly 50 students between those 2 classes, you're left with about 50 kindergarten through 3rd, just under 50. If everybody shows up and if that population maintains as it has the last several years.
Do you have a breakdown of the kindergartners, 1st graders, 2nd graders, 3rd graders, what we're going to be looking at?
We have the roll-up numbers, and the 4th and 5th that we're talking about are roughly 19 and 23. 15 and 23, sorry. 15 and 23 for the record.
And then between K through 3, it's approximately 50.
The rest, yes. And we were looking at approximately 94 there last year.
registered kindergartners?
9.
9 at Kepler.
Those include the ones that are incomplete at this point that we estimate will be finalized and completed. We have missing medical records, missing documents in those registrations, but they've at least been started. So my idea, our idea, my staff's idea is to withhold offering those 2 positions, which we had planned on filling up until a couple of weeks ago, and saving nearly, a large portion of that deficit, that $175,000 that we are now faced with making up. That represents a start, perhaps, of a long-term savings plan that would benefit the district and get us back to the point where we're withdrawing less from the in-fund balance, creating a savings that we could then roll to year, that we could then look at putting back into staff salaries if we're really, really tight on staffing from this point out. That's potentially the best case scenario.
So will you have to add bus service for those 4th and 5th
Mr. Benavides is looking at what that impact would be. However, we
Because
are
that costs some money.
we're already busing middle school and high school, and they are not full buses coming from that area. So we could add existing 4th and 5th grade students to that.
Just a question, don't the high school students go directly from Kepler to Cherokee? They don't come to Dayton, they go directly down
They
Webster
would
Valley.
go Webster Valley and go out the back, yes. So they would
So
probably.
all we're bringing now is middle school.
So-
Elementary, well, no elementary, but the middle school.
If we move forward with this plan or a plan like this, we would be adding some elementary students to the middle school bus route.
But the high school students would still be transferred directly to,
To Cherokee via the Webster Valley in the back direction. So I wanted to put it under reports because it is something to consider. Obviously, time constraints are not ideal at this point because we need to make staffing decisions ASAP for start of the fall.
Let me ask this question, 2 questions. Number 1 is Hawkins Elementary, they can accommodate 38 students,
Yes,
there's room.
yes.
And secondarily, could we incorporate those students into their current staffing situation, or is it going to require another fourth?
Current staffing conditions, but it will be tight. Worst case scenario, and you always have to plan for, and this is a worst case positive for us, more students showing up, but worst case, we have to accommodate that. Mr. Bellmeese assured me that he has room for additional classes should that need arise during the course of the school year, worst case.
Just to cover bridges here, different scenarios. You got 15 4th graders and 23 5th graders. And the teachers have retired. What if some action is taken and those classes are not offered at Keplar Elementary and the parents are notified, with those students, I know there wouldn't be no busing, but with those students, any of those students have the option to go to McVigor's Bend and or Churchill Elementary and or Churchill Intermediate,
or even Sirgons.
or Scoresville for that matter.
I think the key in that is if we offer that choice, we would not be able to accommodate via busing.
Correct.
So if the parents made that choice, the transportation would be on their shoulders. If they chose transportation over a school choice, if we go down that road, we would be busing to Hawkins Elementary.
Correct, and we already have a policy in place, if I'm not mistaken, if a child is out of zone, we do not provide busing.
Correct. And those are subject to principal approval, but in this case, we would work with those principals to ensure that those students are placed where the parents would like them to attend.
As long as room is
Yes, as
available.
long as room and accommodations are appropriate.
How, with the zoning in mind, what do we do to get around that? Because if these kids are zoned to go to Kepler, then when they go to Hawkins Elementary, they're gonna be out of zone.
They would be out of zone based on district need. And that's a
Yeah.
lot, that's allotted for in the policy, and it's also allotted for under state law. The biggest thing for me, and I get where you're going, is making sure that if we make this decision, we have time to communicate to the parents what this process is gonna look like, how it impacts them, how we can be a resource to them, support them, and get their students where they need to be.
Good luck.
And would you wanna implement it this school year? That-
Yeah.
If we're talking about not staffing those positions, it would have to happen immediately.
Okay.
Yeah, it's not I'm not presenting an easy decision this evening, but it is something that reflects, some long-term savings. We're looking at staffing across the board. We have this entire year to see where we could withhold, replacing positions through attrition. That's how we funded, if you remember, zero costed our behavioral intervention class. We identified 2 FTEs this year that were on the low side. We are not backfilling those, and we're using those FTEs for staffing for our behavior intervention, which is a necessary program. And if we weren't wise in that, that would have costed us an additional 2 salary positions, but we're zero costing that.
Was there any teaching assistants affected in this as well?
For 4th and 5th grade, the only ones that would have been affected would have been the special needs assistants, and we can work with Angela to make sure that they are used elsewhere. They will not see a reduction of hours. We've got enough work for them to do, even if we have to relocate somebody for a portion of their day.
I think the county commission has spoke loud and clear to us that it's incumbent upon the board to be as frugal and good stewards as we can be. And I can appreciate that. They're in a difficult position as we are, and they have a budget to meet as we do. And needs are great as well. But it seems like they're on a good track right now, and I want to applaud them for that. They've given us a task to do, and I think we have got to answer the call. And I think their decision was not made lightly of the ones I talked to. A difficult decision was made to take additional monies from us, but our enrollment reflects what it does. The numbers speak for itself. So, we have got that matter again on our agenda at the back, and we can take action on it at that point, but this is a report for where we're at today. So, if there are no further questions of Mr. Hixson or comments, we'll move on our agenda.
I do have several other things under. Go ahead.
So she's just asking for a short 5-minute break once you went to the eviction.
We can take one minute.
Killing my phone battery.
You can indulge us, let's take a
Prior to the break, I did want to say one thing, and I apologize for interrupting Mr. Larkins, but I do want to remind you that this is not a discussion to close Keplar. This is a discussion to save 2 FTEs that we can this particular school year, where we're in a unique position to accommodate the students at another location, with students that will be going into town near the location we're talking about within a year or 2. We're just ramping that up for this year. So we took into consideration the fact that our 5th grade students in Keplar, just for the 1920 school year, would have had 1 year at best at Keplar before needing to transport in for middle school anyway. The 4th graders would have had 2. So we're not discussing closing Keplar at this particular meeting. We're discussing how to save money, and we're in a unique position to accommodate those 2 classes worth of students at a nearby location that's easy to transport to and makes logistical sense. But that is not an easy decision to make. I don't want to minimize that. But it is something that we feel we can do to make the most of with our money and our resources. Number 2, we mentioned this earlier, but the BEP covers our funding for teachers within a ratio of staff to students. Everybody is in agreement with that? So let's say 3rd grade is 22 to 1, 23 to 1, 24 to 1. If we're under that significantly, we don't get BEP funding for those classes that we have to fund, that we have to staff under those ratios. Or we'll get a pro-ratioed amount under that ratio. Kepler is largely funded by local dollars, not through the BEP allocation that we receive every year. you're taking that financial hit. That does not mean that it's not a worthwhile institution, or that the teachers are not making worthwhile efforts, or that the principal, Sandy, is making worthwhile efforts there to reach those kids. It simply means that money-wise, we are spending a lot of money to educate a very small population of students that we could transport and provide resources to within our existing school sites. We have a unique opportunity to try the savings out this year with 4th and 5th, and then we can have further discussions. It gives us time to have that discussion later when we look at more data. But as a reminder, this is not a discussion at the end of this agenda to consider closing Kepler. It is not a discussion about that. In my mind, I just wanted to make that clear.
Thank you. It's 7:45. If we can come back at 7:55, it's about a 10-minute break, and we'll try to be timely.
Haha. Yeah, I took mine to Montana and it's still in my camper.
No problem.
And I have a, thank you. I'll get back to you when I get done after this break. They're killing me with these breaks. My phone's not going to survive it.
Oh, is it right?
Okay, so I'll just...
Is it charging?
Probably. I don't want to shut down. I guess I could shut down. I'll lose my audience. Okay, audience, I'm going to shut down for this break because this meeting is super long and I need to charge my phone battery up or we won't catch the tail end of this meeting when they vote on this stuff they just talked about. So come back in a few minutes and we'll start back up for part 3.